The Justice Department is continuing to grapple with the fallout of a shooting earlier this month by an ICE agent of Renee Good in Minneapolis. We're learning now about the departures and resignations of prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis, as well as lawyers in the Civil Rights Division in Washington.
This is absolutely devastating for Pam Bondi, and I mean that in the most serious way possible, because what's happening inside the Justice Department right now represents a complete breakdown of her authority as Attorney General. At least 6 federal prosecutors in Minnesota just resigned, just walked out, just quit their jobs publicly. And these weren't quiet retirements where people fade away after long careers. These were abrupt resignations, sudden departures, prosecutors abandoning their positions amid turmoil over investigations related to the ICE shooting in Minneapolis, the shooting that killed Renee Good. And it's not just Minnesota prosecutors. Lawyers in the Civil Rights Division in Washington are also leaving, also departing, also saying they can't work under this administration anymore. All happening simultaneously, all connected to how this ICE shooting investigation is being handled. But that's not even worst part. Instead of treating this mass exodus as a crisis, instead of asking what's going wrong, instead of trying to fix the problems driving career professionals away, Pam Bondi went on Fox News and said good riddance to the 6 who are gone, actually celebrated their departures, actually boasted about firing those who resigned. This is the Attorney General of the United States treating career prosecutors walking out as positive development rather than catastrophic signal that something is fundamentally broken in how she's running the department. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built National Brief Network to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. Alright, let's get into what actually happened. The Justice Department is continuing to deal with fallout from a shooting earlier this month by an ICE agent. The shooting killed Renee Good in Minneapolis. And now we're learning about departures and resignations of prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis. Also, lawyers in the Civil Rights Division in Washington leaving. All of this happening amid tension and turmoil over investigations related to the ICE shooting. Local and federal leaders are marking these losses, acknowledging that something major is happening inside DOJ, that career professionals are fleeing, that the department is in crisis. Share this video with everyone you know, because at least 6 federal prosecutors in Minnesota abruptly resigned after being pressured to investigate the widow of the woman killed by an ICE officer, while at the same time seeing DOJ's Civil Rights Division excluded from investigating the actual shooting itself. Think about that priority. Prosecutors being pressured to investigate the victim's widow, not the circumstances of the shooting, not whether the ICE officer's actions were legal, not whether proper procedures were followed. The widow, the grieving partner of the woman who was killed, that's where DOJ leadership wanted investigative resources focused, and prosecutors looked at that and said no. Said we can't ethically do this. Said we're resigning rather than participating in this. Now let me walk you through why this is so devastating and why it shows Bondi has completely lost control. The pressure to investigate the widow represents total departure from normal priorities. A woman was killed by a federal officer. Normal investigative focus would be on whether the shooting was justified, whether the officer followed proper rules, whether force used was appropriate, whether any laws were broken. Instead, these prosecutors were being pushed to examine the victim's widow, to investigate her connections, her background, her associations, to basically build a case that makes the victim look bad so the shooting looks more justified. Think about what that means. DOJ leadership wanted to investigate the grieving widow instead of the officer who pulled the trigger. That's not justice. That's not seeking truth. That's trying to protect the shooter by attacking the victim's family. And career prosecutors recognized that, understood they were being asked to do something wrong, something that violated their ethical obligations. So they resigned, walked away rather than participate. Make sure you're subscribed to National Brief Network, because at the same time, prosecutors were being pressured about the widow, the Civil Rights Division was being excluded from investigating the shooting. The Civil Rights Division exists specifically to investigate potential civil rights violations by law enforcement. That's their job, that's their expertise. Excessive force by federal officers falls directly within their responsibility. But they were shut out, excluded, not allowed to investigate. And that exclusion sent clear message about what outcomes DOJ leadership wanted. If civil rights investigators aren't allowed near the case while resources get directed toward investigating victims' family, That reveals the fix is in. And here's where it gets worse. The Minnesota resignations land on top of broader exodus happening across the Justice Department. Roughly 2/3 of the lawyers in DOJ's federal programs branch have quit. That's about 69 out of 110 lawyers. The federal programs branch is the unit responsible for defending Trump administration policies in court, and 2/3 of them resigned rather than continue doing that work. The departing lawyers include those who said they refused to defend policies they believed were not legally justifiable. That's career attorneys making professional judgment that what they're being asked to defend in court can't be defended honestly. And moreover, the scale of this exodus reveals something massive. When 2/3 of the lawyers assigned to defend your policies resign rather than do it, that's not normal turnover. That's not retirements. That's professional consensus that the policies are wrong, are illegal, are indefensible. These are career lawyers who've worked under multiple administrations, who defended Obama policies, who defended Trump's first term. But something about what they're being asked to do now crosses lines they won't cross. Think about what that means. These aren't political people. These are career attorneys who serve regardless of which party controls government. They have professional standards, ethical obligations, and when they conclude they can't defend policies in good faith, when they decide walking away is better than staying, that's serious. That's professionals saying this administration is asking us to do things we ethically cannot do. Now let's talk about Bondi's response because it shows everything about how she views career professionals. Instead of calming things down, instead of acknowledging that 6 prosecutors walking out might indicate problems worth fixing, Bondi went on Fox News and said good riddance to the 6 who are gone. Those were her words. Good riddance. She boasted that she fired those who resigned before they could use their annual leave. The tone was happy, celebratory. Like she won something. Like removing 6 prosecutors who raised ethical concerns was victory rather than crisis. And Bondi's framing positioned the resignations as cleaning house, as removing obstacles, as getting rid of people who didn't belong anyway. She didn't treat it as loss of expertise, didn't view it as signal that investigative priorities might be wrong. She treated it as positive outcome, as improvement. That reveals how Bondi thinks about career professionals. If they question her directions, if they raise concerns, if they have ethical problems with what they're told to do, she sees them as problems to remove rather than professionals whose judgment matters. And here's where this gets really bad. DOJ's response to the resignations has been to bring in military lawyers to replace the prosecutors who quit. Bloomberg Law reports that military fraud lawyers are being flown in to handle the workload, not experienced federal prosecutors from other districts, not career Justice Department attorneys being moved around. Military fraud lawyers. People whose expertise is in fraud cases, not civil rights investigations, or the kind of work done in U.S. attorneys' offices. The use of military lawyers to replace career federal prosecutors who resigned over ethical concerns shows both how deep the staffing crisis is and how determined DOJ leadership is to proceed without the people who objected. Ethics staff purges make everything worse and create Justice Department increasingly without normal limits. Reports indicate Bondi fired DOJ's top ethics lawyer along with 20 staffers in what critics describe as political purge. Removing ethics oversight while career lawyers flee creates department where fewer people remain who might object to wrong directions. The combination is devastating. Career professionals who raise concerns walk out and get told good riddance. Ethics staff who might stop political misuse get fired. What you're left with is department increasingly full of people willing to do whatever leadership orders without professional pushback. Think about what that means. With ethics staff gone and career lawyers fleeing, who's left to object when leadership directs something improper? Who remains to say this investigation is wrong or this policy violates law? The answer increasingly is nobody. Creating department that will do whatever political leadership wants without anyone pushing back on professional or ethical grounds. Now let me walk you through what the actual Minnesota situation involved because understanding details matters. 6 federal prosecutors in the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office resigned over handling of the ICE shooting investigation. The shooting killed Renee Nicole Good, U.S. citizen, mother of 3, shot by an ICE officer in Minneapolis, and the prosecutors' concerns centered on what they were being asked to do and not do about the case. The pressure to investigate Good's widow for activist ties represents huge departure from normal work. A woman was killed by a federal officer. Normal priority would focus on whether shooting was justified, whether officer followed procedures, whether any laws were violated by the shooter. Instead, these prosecutors were pushed to look at the victim's widow, to examine her political connections, her activism, her background. The investigative focus and version suggests DOJ leadership wanted to build case against the victim and her family rather than examine the shooting's circumstances. If Good was connected to activists, if her widow has political ties, then maybe the shooting looks more reasonable. That's the logic. Investigate the victim to justify what happened to her. And here's where the Civil Rights Division exclusion makes everything worse. The Civil Rights Division specifically handles investigations of potential civil rights violations by law enforcement. They have the expertise, the experience, the understanding of relevant legal rules. Excessive force by federal officers falls right in their area, but they were excluded from this ICE shooting investigation, shut out, not allowed to participate, while local prosecutors were being pressured to investigate the widow. That sends clear signal about desired outcomes, about what DOJ leadership wants the investigation to find. Share this with everyone because the Trump administration also blocked state investigation of the shooting. Minnesota authorities wanted to investigate. Federal government blocked them. So you had situation where federal government controlled the investigation, excluded its own civil rights investigators, and directed resources toward investigating the victim's family rather than the shooter. The prosecutors who resigned apparently looked at this whole arrangement and concluded they couldn't ethically participate. Career prosecutors have obligations. They're supposed to seek justice, not predetermined outcomes. They're supposed to follow evidence. When institutional pressure points toward investigating grieving widow while shielding shooter and excluding civil rights experts, that conflicts with basic ethics. Think about what that means. These 6 prosecutors decided their professional ethics mattered more than their jobs, decided walking away was right response to being asked to do something wrong. That's serious. That's career professionals with years of experience saying this crosses the line. We won't participate. We're out. Now let's talk about the broader federal programs branch exodus because it provides context. About 69 of 110 lawyers quit, roughly 2/3 of the unit. These lawyers were responsible for defending Trump administration policies in court when people sue the government. Their departures indicate widespread professional judgment that the policies can't be defended. Lawyers in federal programs branch aren't political appointees. They're career attorneys who serve across administrations. They defended Obama policies they maybe personally disagreed with. They defended Trump first-term policies. The mass exodus during second term suggests something changed. These lawyers are encountering policies different in kind from what they've been asked to defend before. Make sure you're subscribed to National Brief Network because the stated reasons from departing lawyers center on legal justifiability. They reportedly refused to defend policies they believed weren't legally justifiable. This is professional judgment about whether arguments can be made in good faith, whether you can stand before a judge and defend something with a straight face. When career lawyers conclude positions can't be defended honestly, walking away is ethical response. And when 2/3 of a unit makes that same conclusion, that's not coincidence. That's professional consensus that something is seriously wrong. Congressman Sam Liccardo has called for Bondi's resignation over politicizing DOJ. His statement positions the pattern of resignations, the ethics purges, the combative dismissal of departing professionals as conduct that disqualifies someone from being the nation's chief law enforcement officer. Whether such calls get support depends on political circumstances. Republicans control Congress, so won't act on Democratic calls. But the calls document growing criticism of Bondi's leadership, establish record for future accountability discussions, show that elected officials are noticing the pattern and finding it concerning enough to call for a cabinet secretary's removal. Think about what that means. Even members of Congress are saying Bondi's handling of the department is so bad she should resign, that the way she's treating career professionals is disqualifying, that the exodus of lawyers and the ethics purges represent failure of leadership, and they're making those statements publicly, creating record, establishing pattern, building case for accountability. And here's what Bondi's good riddance response reveals about her whole approach. She's not treating resignations as loss of knowledge and experience, not viewing them as warning signs that maybe something needs fixing. She's treating them as cleaning house, as removal of obstacles, as progress toward having department that does what it's told without questions. That approach guarantees the exodus continues. Because remaining career professionals with concerns will conclude that raising them just gets you celebrated for leaving. And the rule of law problems extend beyond any single case. The Justice Department is supposed to deliver justice, supposed to follow evidence wherever it leads, supposed to seek truth. When career professionals conclude the department is departing from that mission badly enough to resign, that judgment from people with expertise matters. These aren't political actors grinding axes. These are career prosecutors and civil rights lawyers who've worked under multiple administrations. When they say situation is bad enough to walk away, that's significant signal. Share this with everyone because the Minnesota resignations show the pattern clearly. 6 prosecutors walked out rather than investigate grieving widow, while seeing civil rights investigators excluded from shooting investigation. The priority problem was stark enough that career professionals concluded they couldn't participate. They chose ethics over employment, chose professional standards over paychecks. That's prosecutors deciding what they're being asked to do crosses lines. And Bondi's response was to say good riddance and brag about firing them. Bottom line is this. 6 Minnesota prosecutors resigned after being pressured to investigate ICE shooting victim's widow, while Civil Rights Division excluded from actual investigation, and Bondi went on Fox News said good riddance, boasted she fired them. This lands on top of 2/3 of federal programs branch lawyers quitting rather than defend policies they believe aren't legally justifiable. Bondi also fired top ethics lawyer plus 20 staffers, military lawyers being brought in as replacements, and Congressman Liccardo called for her resignation. Career professionals fleeing while leadership celebrates their departure. This story continues. Stay tuned.